All right. So we have our transition in. I'm going to shorten this just a little bit. I like how this looks. So now we want to start with this video. So when it pops to this, I want to write some text on here. Okay. So I take my text tool. I click anywhere on my image in the program panel. And now, once I click on that, do you see that it added this element to my timeline? It automatically added this element. And when it popped this element up, all of my controls, just like every single other element, pops up here. So I see that it gives me options of motion and all these different options, opacity. Now I want to, if you see the text is highlighted, I want to drop this little arrow down and it gives me so many options for text. Okay, so here you can change your text, whatever fonts you have loaded. You can change your font, that is, whatever fonts you have loaded, you can change them here. You can, if it has options for that font, you can change it here. The size, you can change it here. There's two ways to change it. I'll show you. If you have, let me write something. I like this font. I use it a lot. Montserrat, you have a lot of different options. It's clean. All right, so click on that, and I'll say potions. Oops, edge. All right, so now there's a couple ways to make this bigger. Okay, so I click on my selection tool, and once I click on my selection tool, if that element is highlighted on my timeline, I can open it up this way and make it bigger that way. I can also come back over here to my effects panel and I can make it bigger this way. So there's different options. I like to do it with my mouse because I feel like I have a little bit more control. And once these little guidelines are great. So I'm holding down my mouse and I'm moving my little element around, the text around, and you see how it's popping? That's a great tool because you sometimes want to know where the middle and center of your video is. All right. So say I wanted to make it big. We saw how to make it big. Oh, actually, let me say Ocean's Edge training. Show you a couple things. All right, so now I'm going to move this back in the center. Now all of my text is centered. Now, just like any program, Word, anything, same thing. I want to make this centered, right? So I can highlight it, and here are my options. If I want to right align it, left align it, that's there. That is right in this area. So now it's centered. I'll move it back, okay? Now, if I wanted to increase the space in the letters, in between the letters, you can do it here, stretch. You want to increase the spacing in between the lines here. So simple stuff. It's like every other program. All right. But that just shows you control. Now, if I wanted to change the color of the letters, I double click here and it just gives me any option. You can put in numbers. You have your RGB. So easy stuff. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back. I like the white. All right. So now, okay, let's see how this looks. All right, okay, well, that looks okay, but I really want those letters to pop in right when that second video pops in. Simple enough. I can take it and drag it all the way to the beginning, and you see how, like, I'm pushing a little bit hard on my mouse, but it's getting stuck there, which is good. We want it to stick right at the beginning of where it pops in. And I don't want this, if we're thinking layers, I don't want this over this image, and I don't want it over this. So I just pull it in, and we'll pop it in, and let's just see how it looks. All right, that's pretty good, but there's a rule in my one of my boss at home. She was saying you want to give people enough time to read it, right? So about 10 seconds for longer text, about 6 to 8 seconds or so for shorter text. But you just want to give somebody it almost helps to read it in the slowest way possible when you're creating something, because you want to make sure text is long enough on the screen. So let's see. All right. So that's a pretty good amount here. And this is this is not even, this is just a few seconds. This is about 5 seconds, right? So I don't want it to pop in and I don't want it to pop out. I actually want the text to fade in and fade out. So what do we have to do and put on the beginning of this to make it fade in? You know, Clint? Yep, I read your lips. Crosses off. You got it. So we go over here, search for it. I'm clicking and dragging it right to the beginning. And okay, so I want it to end solidly here. So I'm going to pull it out a little bit and then I'll put my crosses off on the end. And that way, by the time it gets to the end of here, it's starting to fade out. Okay, so let's see how that looks. All right. So easy stuff. Very simple stuff. You can do a lot with it. I mean, as much as your mind can create, like I say, you can do, but these are just simple tools that you can do so many things with, but these are the basic tools. Okay, so that's transition of text and audio and video and all of those things. There's also other, these aren't, that crosses off obviously is not the only transition. Oh, let me show you this before I go. So the music, sometimes like I think the thing about Premiere, you can do things clunkily, or you can do it with a finesse, right? So instead of the image or the video coming in a stark intro, we put a little fade on it. Just gave it a little finesse. Same thing with the music. If you go over to your effects panel and press and put in fade, there's audio transitions that pop up. Crossfade are the audio transitions. There's constant gain, constant power, and exponential fade. Constant gain means it's going to basically cross dissolve in. So we take this, I'm holding it down. I can't put it anywhere in the middle. I have to pull it all the way to the front. Oh, it didn't pop on there. There we go. So now if you listen, actually, let me turn this up so you can really listen. So when you listen, it'll just be quiet and then it'll get louder. You hear that? So it comes in with a little bit of a finesse, okay? And then the same thing, the exponential fade is for the end. So then you can fade it out. This really helps if you're putting something and you could end it. So you don't want a video when it pops out to end because it sounds unfinished. But if you put a fade on the end, it's like this, you're coming to the end of it. And the same thing with cross dissolve. At the end, you put at the end, and then your video's coming. All right, easy stuff. All right. So the next thing I want to show you, say, for example, turn this back down. Say, for example, you know that this area is complete. You're not going to change it, but I want everything from this point to this point to move. Okay, so I want to put keyframes on all of this. Okay, so now if I was to try to put a keyframe on the text, a keyframe on the video, and a keyframe on the image and try to sync them so they all move at the same pace, it would be so challenging. So instead of doing that, I'm going to cut right at the end of where my text ends. And now if I highlight this area, it's all one piece. Okay, this is the part that I want to make bigger altogether. Okay, I just showed that. I don't want to pull it out, but I just wanted to show this in a little block. What I do is take my mouse, I highlight it all, I right click, and then I press nest. And it just says nest sequence. You can give it a name if you like, and you say, okay. Now, this whole section that I created is nested. So now I can take this section. Now I don't have to do every single little element in that section as a keyframe. I can just keyframe the whole thing. So right here, I'll just click it. I want it to start at this size. I click my stopwatch. I bring those 2 points to the beginning. And at the end of this section, again, this crosshair corresponds here and here. Let me make it a little bit bigger. I want to make it bigger and it'll go off the screen. That's fine. I want that look. And I'll take my little keyframe, pull it all the way to the end. Now, everything in that section moves without me having to do individual keyframes. Okay. This nesting is a great tool. Now, if I want to get back into this section, you can't unnest anything. Okay. I don't know why they don't have an unnest, but they don't. So you have to double click and watch what happens here. Double click and it opens up my nested sequence. If I click here, I go back to my entire project. Here just shows the nested sequence that I created. Now, if I want to say, oh, I don't really want that nested anymore, I can highlight this. I can hold it, drag it here, bring it back, and I bring it right back. So if you need to, but usually when you're nesting, you know what you want to do and you won't usually do that. What you're trying to do is minimize what you can on your timeline without having it all junky. But again, sometimes you're going to have multiple. I've had, oh my goodness, a dozen different audio tracks for sound effects and, a dozen different video tracks. So sometimes you want that, but if you know for sure, I just want this section all to do the same thing without having to put keyframes on everything. Great, great tool. It's one of my favorite tools. I use it a lot, a lot. Okay, so now I want to get into color correcting. You have any questions? Anybody have questions up to this point? All right.